The church smelled like cedar and something older. Grief, maybe, or the particular stillness that settles over a room when everyone in it is pretending to be somewhere else. I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd walked in thinking it was St. Andrew's on Wellington, where my friend Priya's grandmother was being laid to rest. I'd taken the wrong exit off the 401, punched the wrong address into my phone, and ended up standing in the back of a funeral, so formal, it made my thrift store black dress feel like a costume. I should have turned around. I know that now. I should have quietly backed out through the heavy oak doors and driven 4 blocks east and been somewhere I actually belonged. But then, I saw him. He was lying in an open casket at the front of the church, and even from the back of the room, even in death, he looked like someone who had never once in his life been told no. Dark suit, strong jaw, hands folded over his chest like a man at peace, except his chest was rising and falling, very, very slightly, but it was. I stood there for a long time, telling myself I was imagining it. The light in old churches does strange things. I hadn't eaten since morning. I was stressed about Priya's grandmother and running late, and the whole day had been off. So maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see, which was anything other than a room full of people in expensive clothes, mourning someone who was apparently not dead. His chest rose again. I counted. 1, 2, 3 seconds. It fell. My own breathing stopped completely. The woman next to me in the back pew was crying quietly, into a folded tissue. On my other side, 2 men in dark suits spoke to each other in low voices about flight arrangements. Nobody was looking at the casket the way I was looking at the casket. Nobody else had gone very still in the middle of a church in Oakville, Ontario on a Tuesday afternoon, certain. Not almost certain, certain. That the man being mourned was breathing. I started moving before I decided to move. I don't know what I thought I was doing. I'm a pharmacy technician from Burlington. I count pills. I verify dosages. I once cried in a Shoppers Drug Mart bathroom because a patient yelled at me about a wait time for their prescription, and I held it together until my break, and then I cried for 11 minutes and ate a granola bar and went back out. I am not someone who walks to the front of a stranger's funeral and leans over the casket, but I did. The carpet in the aisle was thick enough to muffle my steps. No one seemed to notice me until I was already there, close enough to see his face properly. The dark circles under his eyes, the slight clench of his jaw, the way his eyelids weren't quite completely still. I put 2 fingers against his neck the way I'd learned in my first aid recertification 3 years ago and never once used. His pulse hit my fingertips like a door slamming open. "He's alive," I said. I said it quietly, I thought. But in a church that's silent quietly is still very loud. The crying stopped. The murmured conversation stopped. Someone behind me made a sharp, involuntary sound. Not quite a word. And then the whole room seemed to hold its breath. I looked up and found myself facing approximately 40 people. All of them staring at me. And I had the very clear and sudden understanding that I had just interrupted the funeral of someone extremely important, and that I did not know a single person in this room, and that I had absolutely no plan. "He has a pulse," I said, because the silence needed something in it. "A strong one. Someone needs to call 911. Nobody moved. Then a man in the second row stood up. He was in his 50s, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of face that had decided a long time ago not to show anything it didn't intend to show. He looked at me for a long moment like he was reading something written in very small print. "Who are you?" he said. I came to the wrong church," I said. "I'm sorry. But that doesn't change what I'm saying. He's breathing. Feel his pulse. Someone needs to call an ambulance right now." Another beat of silence. Then the man in the second row nodded once, and the entire room came alive. His name was Julian. I didn't know that yet when the paramedics arrived, when they confirmed what I'd found, when the room shifted from grief to something more complicated. Relief tangled up with fear tangled up with something I couldn't name that seemed to move through the crowd like a current. I didn't know it when they loaded him onto a stretcher, when 2 of the suited men followed the ambulance in black SUVs, when the woman who had been crying into her tissue took my arm and said, in a voice stripped of all ceremony, "You need to come with us," I said. "I really think I should go find the right funeral." She looked at me like I'd suggested something mildly absurd. He'll want to see you when he wakes up, she said. He'll want to know who you are. I'm nobody, I said. I'm a pharmacy tech. I took a wrong turn. That doesn't matter, she said. And she said it with such complete certainty that I stopped arguing. Her name was Beatrice. She was, I would learn later, Julian's aunt, his father's sister, the one who had kept the family together through several things she never fully explained. She sat next to me in the back of one of the black SUVs and didn't speak for the entire drive to the hospital. And I looked out the window at the November landscape sliding past. Gray sky, stripped maples, the particular flat light of southern Ontario in late fall, and thought about how Priya's grandmother was being buried without me there. I texted Priya, I'm so sorry. Something happened. I'll explain later. I'm thinking of your family. She texted back, it's okay. You okay? I stared at my phone and typed, yes. I think so. I'll call you tonight. I didn't call her until 3 days later. He woke up in the early evening, 6 hours after I'd walked into the wrong church. The doctor, a woman about my mother's age with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, came out to the waiting room where Beatrice and I were sitting and said that he was conscious and stable and asking questions. She said it carefully, the way people say things when the answers are complicated. Beatrice stood up immediately. Then she looked at me. Come, she said. I should go home, I said. I've been here for 6 hours. He doesn't know me. He doesn't need. He's asking about the woman from the church, Beatrice said. Come. The room they'd put him in was private, at the end of a corridor that felt quieter than the rest of the floor. The man from the second pew, whose name I still didn't know, was standing outside the door. He looked at me again in that careful, reading way he had. Tread lightly, he said. It wasn't a threat. It was something else. Advice, maybe, or a warning given with some genuine concern for my welfare. Julian was sitting up in the hospital bed, which surprised me. I'd expected. I don't know what I'd expected. Someone diminished. Someone pale and confused. Instead, he was sitting up with his arms resting on the blanket in front of him. And when I came through the door, his eyes found me immediately, like he'd known exactly where I was going to be. He had dark eyes. Not black, dark brown, with enough light in them to make them complicated. You're the one, he said. I walked into the wrong church, I said. It came out more defensive than I meant it to. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. I know, he said. Beatrice told me. I'm sorry for interrupting your... I paused, because there was no good way to finish that sentence. I should let you rest. I just wanted to make sure you were... Sit down, he said. I sat down. We looked at each other for a moment. He had the look of someone who had been unconscious for several hours and had a lot of thoughts about it. And none of those thoughts were ones he was going to share with me right now. What's your name? He asked. Nora, I said. Nora Callahan. Julian Kovach, he said. He said it the way people say a name they've carried for a long time, like it's just a word, not a weight. What do you do, Nora Callahan? Pharmacy technician, I said. At a Rexall in Burlington. And you ended up at my funeral. By accident, I said. I was going to a different one. He nodded slowly, like this confirmed something. And you walked to the front of the room, he said. In front of 40 of my... He paused. Associates. Family. And you told them I was alive. You were breathing, I said. It seemed like relevant information. He looked at me for a long time. Most people in that room, he said carefully, would not have done that. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know yet what he meant by it. I should let you rest, I said again. You've said that twice, he said. And you're still here. You told me to sit down. Another corner of the mouth shift, not quite a smile, the outline of one. I did, he said. Thank you, Nora. I went home that night and sat in my apartment in Burlington. 3rd floor, 1 bedroom, the radiator that clanged every night at 2 a.m., and tried to explain to myself what had happened. I made tea. I stood in the kitchen and looked out at the parking lot and thought, you went to the wrong church. You found a pulse. You went to the hospital. You sat in a waiting room for 6 hours. A man in a hospital bed learned your name. That was all. That was the whole story. I believed that for about 4 days. The flowers arrived on Thursday. Not a small bunch. An arrangement so large it barely fit through my apartment door. Cream roses and eucalyptus and something I didn't recognize, white and delicate, and a card that said simply, thank you. J. I stood in my hallway holding the card for a long time. Then I Googled Julian Kavach. I sat down on my couch and I read for a while. And then I put my phone face down on the cushion beside me, and I looked at my ceiling. And I thought about the man from the second pew saying, "Tread lightly." And Beatrice's complete certainty when she said he'll want to know who you are. And I thought about Julian's eyes finding me instantly when I'd walked through the door. Julian Kavach was 41 years old, and he ran a private investment firm headquartered in Toronto with offices in Vancouver and Montreal. The firm's website was clean and tasteful and said almost nothing. The articles about him said more. Words like private, influential, and connections that span industries appeared frequently. There was a photograph from a charity gala at the ROM. Julian in a tuxedo, one hand around a glass of wine, looking slightly away from the camera with the expression of a man who was somewhere else in his head. There were also some other articles, ones that used different words. I texted Priya that night. "Remember how I said something happened?" I typed, "Can I tell you about it?" She called me immediately. I told her. Not everything, I didn't have all of it yet, but what I had, the wrong church, the pulse, the hospital, the flowers. When I finished, Priya was quiet for a moment. "Nora," she said. "I know," I said. "This man is, I know. And he sent you flowers that don't fit in your apartment. They're on the floor next to the bookcase," I said. "They're actually very beautiful." "I don't know if I should be excited for you or terrified," Priya said. "Both," I said. "I think both is correct." He called the next day. I don't know how he got my number. I didn't ask. He said, "I'd like to take you to dinner if you're willing." And he said it like a question, which I appreciated. And I said, "I think you should probably be resting." And he said, "I've been resting for 4 days. I'm very tired of resting." I laughed. I surprised myself with it. We went to a restaurant in Oakville, the kind with no menu in the window, where the host knows your name before you give it. I wore the only dress I owned that seemed appropriate, and I sat across from Julian Kavach and tried to behave like a person who ate in restaurants like this regularly, which I did not. He watched me look at the menu for a moment. "Order what you want," he said. "Not what you think you should order." I ordered the duck. I don't know why that's the detail I remember most clearly, that I ordered the duck and it arrived, and it was extraordinary. And Julian watched me eat with an expression I couldn't read yet and wouldn't fully understand for a long time. "Tell me about your work," he said, so I told him. About the Rexall in Burlington. About the old men who came in every month for the same prescriptions and knew all the technicians by name. About the woman who brought us butter tarts at Christmas every year. Because she said we'd helped her mother, and none of us could remember specifically what we'd done, but we ate the butter tarts anyway. About the afternoon I'd stayed an extra hour without being asked, to help a teenage boy figure out how his mom's new inhaler worked, because she didn't speak much English and he was trying so hard to understand. Julian listened. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look past me. He was entirely, quietly present in a way that was almost unusual. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked finally. "Like what?" he said. "Like I'm." I stopped. I wasn't sure how to finish it. "Like you're interesting," he said. "Because you are." I looked at my plate. I felt my face do something I couldn't stop it from doing. "I'm a pharmacy technician who walked into the wrong church," I said. "That's not all you are," he said. We stayed until the restaurant was nearly empty. Walking out, his hand came to the small of my back. Briefly, so briefly, and I felt it for the rest of the drive home. The complication arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks later. I was at work when my manager called me into the back. She was holding her phone, and she looked the way people look when they've received information they weren't expecting and aren't sure what to do with. "There's someone here for you," she said. Outside. It was the man from the second pew. He was standing in the Rexall parking lot in the November rain, and when I came out, he looked at me with that same careful expression. "My name is Darius," he said. "I'm Julian's head of security." "Okay," I said. "We've found the source of what happened at the church," he said. "Someone tampered with Julian's medication. Someone who knew his schedule, his doctor, and how to make something look like a cardiac event that wasn't." He paused. "That someone has not been identified yet." I looked at him. "Why are you telling me?" I asked. "Because Julian trusts you," he said. And because whoever did this knows who you are now. You were seen at the church. You were seen at the hospital. You've had dinner with him twice. The rain was cold. I could feel it on the back of my neck. Are you saying I'm in danger? I said. I'm saying we'd like to take some precautions, he said. With your permission. I thought about the radiator that clanged at 2 a.m. I thought about Priya saying, I don't know if I should be excited or terrified. I thought about Julian's voice on the phone saying, I'm very tired of resting. Call Julian, I said. Tell him I'd like to speak with him. Julian came that evening. He sat in my apartment, filling it up somehow, the way certain presences do. And he told me what Darius had told me, and he told me some more things, and he was careful and clear about what he was and what he did and what that might mean. And he didn't soften any of it or wrap it in better language than it deserved. I listened. When he finished, I said, Why did you come yourself? You could have sent Darius. He looked at me with those complicated, dark eyes. Because you deserve to hear it from me, he said. And because I wanted to see your face when I told you. Why? Because, he said, I wanted to know if you'd be afraid of me. Are you dangerous? I asked. Yes, he said, without hesitation. To me? I asked. A long pause. He looked at me very carefully. No, he said, not to you. I believed him. I'm not sure I can explain why, except that some things you know in your body before your mind catches up. And my body had been certain about Julian Kovach since the moment his pulse hit my fingertips. Okay, I said. He blinked. Okay? Okay, I said. What do we do next? What came next was 3 weeks of Darius appearing in parking lots, of a new lock on my apartment door that I didn't ask for and found one morning simply existing, of Julian calling me every night at 9 o'clock, which became the thing I organized the rest of my day around without meaning to. And then came the night they found out who had done it. It was someone inside Julian's own organization. Not a stranger, not an enemy from outside. Someone who had sat in that church and cried into a tissue and waited to see if the plan had worked. I wasn't there when Julian found out. I was at home eating leftovers and watching a documentary about migratory birds. But I felt it when my phone rang at 11:30, and Julian's voice was different, stripped of something, raw in a way it hadn't been before. It's done, he said. Are you okay? I said. A pause that said everything. I will be, he said. Where are you? I asked. He told me. I got in my car. I drove to the address he'd given me. A house in Mississauga I hadn't been to before, modest from the outside in the particular way that things are modest when they're trying not to draw attention. And Julian opened the door before I knocked, like he'd been standing just inside it. I didn't say anything. I just walked in. He closed the door behind me. We stood in the hallway for a moment, and then I did something I hadn't planned and didn't think about. I put my arms around him, this man who had every resource and every protection and every contingency available to him, who had survived something that was supposed to kill him, who had spent 3 weeks very carefully not asking more of me than I was ready to give, and I held on. His arms came around me slowly, like he was being careful. Like he was handling something he wasn't sure he was allowed to have. I don't need you to be someone different, I said, into his shoulder. I know who you are. I'm not asking you to be anything else. He was quiet for a long moment. That's not something people usually say to me, he said. I know, I said. That's why I'm saying it. People ask sometimes. Not many people, because we're private. Because Julian is always private, and I've learned to be how it started. And I tell them, I took a wrong exit off the 401. I tell them I walked into the wrong church. I tell them I counted to 3 and felt a pulse, and said something into a silent room, and everything after that was consequence. What I don't tell them, mostly because it's hard to explain without sounding strange, is what I felt in that moment when I put my fingers against his neck and knew, not just that he was alive, something more than that. Something that felt less like chance and more like, I don't know, a door I was always going to find. I still work at the Rexall. I still count pills and verify dosages, and stay late sometimes to help someone who needs it. The old men still come in every month. The woman still brings butter tarts at Christmas. My radiator still clangs at 2 a.m. I just don't mind it as much anymore, because most of the time, there's someone next to me who reaches over without waking up and puts a hand on my shoulder, and I fall back asleep inside of a minute. I found him in a casket in a church I wasn't supposed to be in. And every day since then has felt like something I walked into on purpose.